Legal expert and volunteer firefighter, manager and climate frisk facilitator, business manager and mentor. At BNP Paribas, every employee has a unique career path and specific unexpected community engagements. In this podcast, we'll learn more about the commitment of the men and women from across the world who are working, each in their own way, towards a more inclusive, durable and sustainable society. We asked them to tell us their stories, and they shared them with us via voice notes. And that is what you're about to hear. Welcome to Unexpected People, the podcast that'll make you want to help others.
When we fight a fire, we operate within a clear framework. Like in a company, there are multiple services. Everything is well oiled. We don't think, we act. We follow orders. We use radios to communicate. What we need to do is crystal clear, but our bodies sweat and we can feel the tiredness setting in. We also have to refill the water tank in the truck multiple times a day. We often use this moment to take a break. Fires can start very quickly, so we must be reactive in case it breaks out again. We monitor them during the night to make sure that doesn't happen.
Once I get the instructions from my predecessor, it's just me and my 4 screens. I need to monitor the news dispatches from agencies on X. I also need to keep an eye on the written press. Then I prioritize. My superiors don't care about inflation, but they do care if there's an intervention from firefighters or the civil protection services during an earthquake or a hurricane. They're interested in knowing if there was a report made on patrols from the French Navy in the Red Sea or in the Gulf of Aden. I try to gather as much information as I can on these topics and pass it on to them.
One wears a fireproof suit, the other green cargo pants and a cap. But it's not their job. Anne-Sophie and Romain are both reservists, and most of their time is spent in the office, not in a station. At BNP Paribas, operational reservists and volunteer firefighters are employees like others. They are part of different factions in the army, the military, the national police, or the civil protection forces. They dedicate some of their personal and professional time to serve the nation. In this episode, we'll learn more about the double life they lead. Anne-Sophie is a volunteer firefighter who fought in the 2022 Gironde forest fires in southwest France. Romain does media monitoring for the French Ministry of Defence. They both play an essential role in protecting the French territory and its population, while reinforcing the connection between the armed forces and the civil society. As you'll see, BNP Paribas supports both equally. Anne-Sophie is a business affairs manager at BNP Paribas in Gironde. Romain is a data protection officer at BNP Paribas Leasing Solutions in the Greater Paris area. What you just heard are the stories of one of their office days. Romain has been an operational reservist for the past 30 years. He's also an army captain in the French Navy. Anne-Sophie became a volunteer firefighter in 2017. They both share a strong sense of duty and a desire to serve society.
I come from a military family. I always wanted to enlist in the army. I think serving your country is a noble pursuit. I also like the thrill of it. Becoming an operational reservist was obvious to me, and I've been enlisted since the end of my military service 30 years ago. I was mobilized on different missions. I was part of external operations in Bosnia. I was in command of special operations. I was also part of military intelligence. Today I work as a duty officer at the DICOD, the Delegation for Information and Communication for the Ministry of Defence.
Volunteering is a true passion. Some people do sports, others dance. I fight fires. I'm very passionate about helping the members of my community. But it's also exercise. I do a lot of sports. Since 2017, when I enlisted, I spend way more time running at the gym in the fire station than anywhere else. I had to pass psychological and physical tests to become a volunteer.
Anne-Sophie and Romain share the same passion and sense of duty. They often have to make themselves available, and even if their involvement differ, they're both 100% committed.
I'm not with the father of my children anymore, so essentially, the weeks when my kids are at their dad's, I make myself available from 4 or 5 a.m. onwards. That gives me a little leeway to clock in the following day. It's pretty tiring, so I don't do it that often. Most of the time, I volunteer during my personal time, but BNP Paribas gives me the opportunity to do it during my working hours as well. Sometimes there are emergencies, like during the storm that took place in the southwest. My employer also allowed me to take some time off so I could help during the fires of 2022.
I go to the ministry either in the evenings, at night, on the weekends, or during public holidays. Once I get there, I monitor the media, the press, and the news dispatches from agencies. I check what's happening on the 3 main national TV news channels. Most of the time I go there on Saturdays. I get there in the morning around 8:30 a.m. and I stay there throughout the night until the following morning 8:30 a.m. When I go during the week, it's around 5:30 p.m. by the time I get there. Again, I work until the following day, 8:30 a.m. To do that, I have to take half a day off in the afternoon or in the morning to either go straight back to work or to recuperate before heading back into the office. I try to make sure this commitment fits with my work schedule seamlessly.
Being that committed to volunteering is almost like leading a double life. How do they manage such responsibilities while being in full-time employment? That's where BNP Paribas comes into play. If Anne-Sophie and Romain are equally committed as employees and as volunteers, it's also thanks to their employer, who encourages them to facilitate their engagement.
BNP Paribas supports me in 2 ways. First, I have 15 authorised days off to volunteer on top of paid leave. Then I get support from my line manager, who's flexible and who understands my obligations outside of work.
My employer gives me 15 days off per calendar year to volunteer. That can be used for training and in case of emergencies. For training sessions, they need to be warned by the Emergency Service Centre about a month prior. For emergencies, they only need to know a few hours in advance. Overall, I feel very supported by my colleagues and my management. I'm subjected to the duty of discretion, so we don't really talk about it in great details, but I received a tremendous amount of support during the fires. Overall, my colleagues are quite curious. They ask questions, but they always mean well.
It would be difficult for Anne-Sophie and Romain to be that committed without the agreement between the Armed Forces Ministry, the National Guard, and the Fire Department. On top of emergencies, they have to remain available for training sessions. They are crucial for optimal performance on their part.
I remember my first intervention. I helped someone who had blocked airways, which means they had swallowed something that stayed stuck in their throat. I had been training prior to this event, and we had already covered basic first aid. They make sure that we're properly equipped from our first intervention onwards to face that kind of situation head on. I got in the ambulance with the supervisor and another volunteer. As a team, we handled the situation well. Everything went according to plan. That intervention really made me feel like the weeks were worth it. It made me feel excited to be part of the fire brigade. I was relieved that everything went smoothly. Actually, a few years later, I made use of that skill set in the office. I was going for lunch with my colleagues and we noticed someone in cardiac arrest right down the building. I handled it. I called the emergency services, started to do CPR on them while waiting for help. That's what I would have done in a regular intervention.
In 2022, something happened in Anne-Sophie's life. It was the middle of July, and the fires were starting to take over the Bay of Arcachon, not far from where she lives. At the same time, Romain was in his office in the 15th arrondissement in Paris, doing media monitoring to ensure the safety of civil society. However, their days were about to be drastically different.
Usually I make sure that I'm on call when I'm working from home. I live minutes away from the Ministry of Defence, so I can get there quickly. I change once I get there, but sometimes I keep my civil outfit. I do the handover with my predecessor, and then I start to look at the news. I investigate. Sometimes I do targeted research if I'm asked to. That's a bit stressful because in these cases, I only have one night to gather all the information I can find on one specific topic.
The fires in the southwest that took place in 2022 were mentioned a lot in regional news. They were also talked about a lot at the fire station, so I knew I could get called at any point. I was on holidays, but I made sure to remain available to help my colleagues if needed. One morning, the alarm rang. So I gathered my stuff. I knew I had to leave, but I didn't know for how long it was going to be for. I told my kids that I was leaving for a mission and that I'd be back as soon as I could. My mother came over to help take care of the kids. I didn't go too much into detail, but they knew where I was going because they saw it on the news. I got to the fire station to put on my fireproof gear, trousers, jackets, hood and helmet. When we got to where the fire was, we opened the water towers from the fire truck, we pulled out the pipe, we got our instructions from the chief fire officer, and we moved the pipe accordingly. We did everything we could to stop the fire. It was really hot, but we were laser focused. We acted fast. We didn't have time to think. We didn't have time to be scared. Like, maybe we thought about how risky it was at the start, but honestly, when I thought about all the equipment we had, I wasn't worried. I knew we were ready. Of course, we knew there was a risk, but we didn't think about it.
Of course, the situations aren't the same. Near Arcachon, firefighters gathered from all over Europe. Thousands came from different countries to provide support. The fire spread very quickly and lasted for weeks. At the ministry, the information systems and the news were going crazy. But nothing that was too much for Romain to handle. During the night, he only took a few hours' break in a small room where he could get some rest. On her part, Anne-Sophie and the other firefighters took a few hours to rest. A camp had been set up where they could talk about the day, play cards, and sleep while they could. But the other members from the fire brigade weren't the only people providing her with support.
The inhabitants' generosity, their altruism, is really what impressed me during this 2022 mission. I was pleasantly surprised by this surge of solidarity. I wasn't expecting it at all, especially when I got there on the first day. There was an actual buffet. I'm not used to this. Normally we eat snacks and field ration that we just have to heat up like in the army. But this time it was an actual buffet. The town hall organized everything. Local restaurants and local inhabitants got involved. Each of them brought something. It was great. In the end, what we achieved wasn't just thanks to the firefighters. It was thanks to everyone who got involved. The people who really did their best to participate. That's what really stuck with me.
Anne-Sophie spent multiple weeks at the heart of a forest fire. Romain spent a whole night tracking fake news and sensitive information. Almost nothing makes it out of the station or the ministry. Both have to comply with the duty of discretion and cannot talk about what happens to their relatives. After their missions, life carries on as if nothing happened. Or does it?
When I'm done with work, I'm tired. I have red eyes. Usually I follow the same ritual. I go to the bakery to get pastries for my kids. I get home, I put them on the kitchen counter, then I go take a nap. I try not to look at screens. The following days, my colleagues don't ask too many questions. I usually don't talk much about what happened either. When I was part of military intelligence, nobody knew what I was doing there apart from HR. They knew where I was deployed, but they didn't know what I was doing. It was never an issue for me. I don't talk about it much with my kids either. However, if a geopolitical topic comes up in a conversation, people give credit to what I have to say.
At the end of the summer of 2022, we got back into the office. We were so pleased when it started raining at the end of September. I love the sun. It might have been the first time I was glad it rained. I was happy to see my colleagues again. The director asked me how it was, but I didn't linger too much on the details. Once again, it was teamwork. That's what made it worth it. The firefighters, the colleagues who were giving notes, it was all very heartwarming. It makes you realize what truly matters. Human connection, cooperation, helping each other. It's something that I keep with me even now.
Serving France as much as one can is the principle that truly connects Anne-Sophie and Romain.
Today, I want to be part of a team. I want to guide others. I just took an exam to become sergeant, which means I will become the ambulance, first aid and operations crew leader. For the first time, I feel I want to become a manager at my job as well. I want to pass on what I know. I feel up for the task.
I'm also a coordinator for the reservists and volunteer firefighters crew at BNP Paribas. At work, people know that I'm a reservist. It does happen that sometimes people come to me to ask about my commitment, how long I've been there, what I do, what it's like. In this case, I take the time to talk to them to understand what they're looking for, in what way they could be involved, what could suit them best according to their passions and interests. At home, my daughter completed her General National Service in a military hospital. She's thinking about becoming a reservist too. It makes me proud of her.
As civilians, Anne-Sophie and Romain continue to inspire admiration from both their relatives and colleagues. Far from the hustle of their missions, when they step out of their uniform, their human qualities remain: composure, seriousness, humility. Did their stories inspire you too? Listen to the next episodes of Unexpected People to discover all the different ways you can get involved with BNP Paribas. This was Unexpected People, a podcast by BNP Paribas, written by Helen Carbonell, hosted by Sara Woodcock, edited by Benjamin Massé, and produced by Lakme. Original music by Simon Zrak.